The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Glad to have you here. Gosh, I just crack myself up all the time, Lang. I tell you what, it's a good thing I can laugh at myself. Anyway, we're glad to have you here on this day after America celebrates its independence from Great Britain. Actually, it wasn't really celebrating our independence; it was celebrating our declaration of it, yes. And it wasn't even that, really, but we'll talk about that in a moment. This is a live call-in show, 343-9927, 343-9927. Feel free to call in and correct us or share your thoughts and questions or insights on the topic of the evening. And, of course, the topic of the evening is, just facts, trivia, and obscure nothings regarding the date of July 4th. And we may not, if we have time, we may not stick to just things that apply to the United States. Anyway, Lang Baker is here tonight, as usual. Lang, good to have you.
Glad to be here.
Okay, now, let's start off with stuff that pertains to the United States first. And you were telling me some neat stuff about the writing of the Declaration.
Well, yeah, there's a bit more than just the 4th of July regarding that. First, there was a resolution presented by Richard Henry Lee of Virginia back on the 7th of June proposing the separation of the 13 colonies from Great Britain. And they weren't ready to take action on that yet, so they decided to come back in July. And so on the 2nd of July, they voted to approve the first part of Richard Henry Lee's resolution, which was to sever the ties with Great Britain and set themselves up as independent states.
Mm-hmm.
So that was on the 2nd of July. And 2 days later, the 4th of July, is when they approved the declaration to the public of the independence and stated all the reasons, which Jefferson had primary role in drafting that.
Mm-hmm.
Although even on the 4th of July, not all of the colonies approved it.
There were some holdouts, weren't there?
Well, New York abstained. The others approved it at that time, although it wasn't signed by more than a couple of folks at that time. One source says there was one signer, that John Hancock was the only one to sign it on the 4th of July. Another source says there was a second person, the secretary, I believe, of the group.
And John Hancock is famous for his big signature on there because I think he knew the King of England at the time, had personal relations with him, or whatever. They knew each other, and he wanted to let him know, this is me signing this declaration.
Yeah, one story I heard was he wanted the king to be able to read it without having to put his specs on.
So
well. I don't know.
Yes, it probably was a good bit of contempt going on there, too.
Yeah.
Rashness, I would say.
So anyway, it was on the 9th of July when New York finally got around to adopting the declaration and the resolution both. And then the second part, which are provided for agreements in treaties among the 13 now new independent states. That second part was approved. The second part of Lee's original resolution was approved in September of '76, and the third part was approved in November of '77, although it wasn't actually ratified until '81 by the last of the 13 new states.
You said something. Go ahead.
The third part was the Articles of Confederation, which is what served as a constitution at that time. Yeah,
it was, and the reason why they met in Philadelphia for the first Constitutional Convention was because they wanted to strengthen the Articles of Confederation, because the states, I guess the leaders of the country didn't, or the smart people, educated people, were afraid that they needed a stronger central government because they knew the British would be coming back soon to try to retake the colonies.
Yeah, I don't remember all my history about that. I think financing the federal government was also part of it, too. There were issues about raising of funds for that, for the federal level
Yeah,
of
as a matter of
government.
fact, after the Revolutionary War, people didn't want to pay taxes to pay the soldiers. And, Washington, I think, passed or, got Congress to pass the whiskey tax, and there was a rebellion over that, the Whiskey Rebellion in America. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. So there was also a woman whose name appears on the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence.
Betsy Ross, right?
No, Betsy Ross was the flag lady. The woman was. She was the one who published the first publication of it with the names of all the signers on it. It had already been published anonymously, so to speak. But in January of 1777, Congress authorized the publication with all the names, and the woman who ran the publishing company, 38-year-old Mary Catherine Goddard, added her name when she published it down there. So there is a woman who, she didn't sign it out in longhand at the time that it was signed by the representatives at the Congress, but her name is on there on the official first publication of the Declaration of Independence with the names.
Now, was
the
this...
signatures.
I'm curious about that because the original versions were written in longhand. They didn't have typeset for those letters, did they? So how was it?
They had printing presses. I
Right.
don't know just how the printing presses worked then. I think
Yeah.
I think that, they already had movable type or
Yeah, but I mean,
from the Gutenberg era back in whenever
right.
it was.
But I mean, I'm just the lettering, the way the letters and all that. I didn't.
Well,
You know what
they
I'm
had
saying.
different fonts than the fonts that we use today. That's why you see the curly S's and stuff
Oh,
like that.
I wonder if they use Helveticus, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe they use Goddard font.
Yeah.
Since,
But I'm wondering,
Catherine
is there a
Goddard.
written, is there a longhand copy of the Declaration of Independence with her name on it? Is what I was
No,
wondering.
I don't imagine, because that was what was drafted and signed at the
Right.
convention. And
So-
she got it later for publication
Okay.
and added her name in the publication of it. But
That's for my own curiosity for some time in the future.
I'm guessing here.
Okay, well, sorry, I didn't mean to get off
So-
on that. I should have, one of the million things I should have learned beforehand.
Well, then there are the sequences of how it came to be celebrated. The first celebration was 4 days after the first 4th of July signing in Philadelphia, which, of course, is where it was signed. And 4 days later, they had a big celebration in Philadelphia. And the first observation on the 4th of July was the next year, also in Philadelphia. But it wasn't celebrated in the White House until 1801, when Jefferson was in the White House. And it wasn't made a federal holiday until after the Civil War in 1870.
And it was an unpaid holiday at that, right?
Until the Great Depression, 1938, is when it was made a paid federal holiday.
Interesting.
So,
I noticed, too, that eating salmon on the 4th of July in New England figures those New England liberals, I mean, you were saying earlier there's like, tons of hamburgers or hot dogs that are eaten in the United States. What was the number on that? Do you have that close to hand?
yeah, well, it comes out to about a half a hot dog per person. It's around 150 million, something like that. I said, I'll let somebody else have my half of
Number
half a hot dog.
of
hot dogs.
Okay.
And we spend about $340 million on beer on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Or for the 4th of July.
Yeah, well, that promotes patriotism, right? Good advertising.
Well, I guess you could take it back to 1778 on the 4th of July. General George Washington ordered a double ration of rum for his soldiers to celebrate. I don't know how much a double ration would be, but...
Yeah, I don't know. The sailors in Britain used to get a half pint, I think, of beer. No, they had rum, too. They got rum, I recall reading. So, yeah, but still, you want to be careful. You don't want to get your soldiers drunk. I mean, that's how Washington won the Battle of Trenton. He got in there early in the morning when all the Hessians, actually,
The German soldiers
were hung over and passed out.
Yeah.
And anyway, okay, well, we're 10 minutes here into it. I'd like to remind everybody this is a Pause for Thought with Wayne Parker and Lang Bicker. This is a live call-in show. You can feel free to call in at 343-9927, 343-9927. Anything else, Lang? Or I'll move on. I'd like to talk about the Liberty Bell, actually.
That's fine.
Okay. Everybody in America including me up until I got ready for the show, thought that the Liberty Bell was created to celebrate American liberty. But actually, according to Constitution Daily, the Liberty Bell predates the American Revolution. The Pennsylvania Assembly had the Liberty Bell made in 1751 to mark the 50th anniversary of William Penn's 1701 Charter of Privileges, which served as Pennsylvania's original constitution. And it was actually called the State House Bell because it was put in the State House. This is 1751, yes, so we hadn't even had a revolution yet there, and it wasn't called the Liberty Bell. But, you know, I did some reading years ago on William Penn, and he actually was one of the few people in American history that I recall who understood the idea that nobody can own the earth. There was an understanding in his charter that even people who controlled large tracts of land for farming or whatever had to allow their neighbors onto the property to scavenge and look for firewood and everything. He was not allowed to. They were not allowed to prohibit people from coming on their property. And once they harvested their crop, they had to allow the local citizens to come in their property and pick up anything that was left behind. So it, you know, but that was, and the people appreciated that sort of thing apparently, because that's why the Liberty Bell was made to commemorate William Penn. And there are a couple of things inscribed on the bell. One is from Leviticus 25:10. It states, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And of course they were talking about, I guess, just Pennsylvania at the time, because that's all it applied to. Oh, let's see, and there's something else here. Also on the front of the bell, it says, "Pass and Stow, Philadelphia, 1753, in Roman numerals." And I only know that because you told me. And that was rather interesting. Another cool, neat trivia piece there. See here, it says the bell was requested in 1751. The bell arrived in Philadelphia on September 1st, 1752, but was not hung until March 10th, 1753, on which day Isaac Norris wrote, quote, "I had the mortification to hear that it was cracked by a stroke of the clapper without any other violence, as it was hung up to try the sound." So the first time they tried to ring it, it cracked.
Oops.
Yeah, and they were bummed. And, you know, of course, it says here that the cause of the break is thought to have been attributable to either to flaws in its casting, or perhaps it was too brittle. And, you know, it could have been any one of those two, because metallurgy was very primitive in those days. Well, maybe not primitive, but whatever. Anyhow, after it cracked the first time, two Philadelphia foundry workers named John Pass and John Stow were given the cracked bell to be melted down and recast. They added 1.5 ounces of copper for every pound of old bell in an attempt to make the new bell less brittle. And for their labors, they charged slightly over 36 pounds. But then it says here that the new bell was raised in the belfry on March 29th, 1753, and upon trial, it seems they have added too much copper. They were so teased with the witticisms of the town that they will very soon make a second attempt, wrote Isaac Norris to a London agent. Apparently nobody was pleased with the tone of the bell. I mean, they put so much copper in it that it sounded awful. They didn't like the tone. So Pass and Stow indeed tried again. They broke up the bell and recast it. And then on June 11th, 1753, it was reported that last week was raised and fixed in the State House steeple the new great bell, cast here by Pass and Stow, weighing 2,080 pounds.
How about that? Third try the charm, huh?
Yeah, right. But, you know, Pass and Stow, they put their stamp on there, just like Godard, or the woman you mentioned that put her name on the Declaration of Independence. You know, got to get your plug in there, you know. Oh, let's see. There were some other interesting things here about the Liberty
Well, it cracked
Bell.
again later then, right?
Yes, it did. On July 4th. Did you have that? I have it here somewhere, but I'm not looking at it right now.
1846 was the last time it was rung.
Yes, well, Washington's birthday. That's right. It was the last time it rang. And yes, it says here, it is agreed that the final expansion of the crack, which rendered the bell unringable, was on Washington's birthday in 1846.
So that would have been in February.
Okay, and now on July 4th, they tap it 13 times, right?
That's what I've read or heard.
I wonder if they tap it hard enough to... They got to, make it a significant tap. They're not going to...
Wait, you don't have to tap a coin against a metal object very hard for it to make a sound. You have
Yeah.
to be pretty close to hear it, maybe, but...
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, no, it wouldn't ring out like a bell's pealing, but I was just wondering if they used a hammer or, a pencil, something like that. But anyhow, let's see.
Well, another
Go ahead.
emblem associated with Liberty and the 4th of July is, of course, the Statue of Liberty.
Yes, indeed.
It was presented as a gift from France on the 4th of July in 1884 and shipped across in 1885 and reassembled in its current location in 1886.
Now, its skin is made of copper, correct?
Well, I don't know all that. It says in what I read that at the time in 1886, it was the tallest iron structure in the world.
Right. There's an iron frame inside of it with the
Okay.
cantilever type designs of construction stuff, but technical term there. But no, as I understand it, it's made of. It was cast of copper in different pieces, of course, and then probably riveted together. But well, now if you look at it, it's green, bluish green, just like old pennies. It's
Right.
got the corrosion on it. They call that the patina, even though it's rust. But anyway.
But it's not rust because it's not iron.
Okay, well, it's corrosion.
Copper oxide.
It's corrosion, yes.
Yeah. So the full name of the statue is Liberty Enlightening the World. And it was modeled to represent a Roman goddess of freedom. So we've got a gigantic statue of a Roman goddess standing to welcome people to the country. Only it wasn't originally designed to be a welcoming statue. It was designed to memorialize Abraham Lincoln and commemorate the freedom of the slaves. It was an abolitionist in France who was the promoter of he was the president of the French Anti-Slavery Society and the promoter of presenting this gift to the United States.
Yeah, and I recall, I think in 6th grade, being taught that it was a gift from the French to celebrate our independence. There was nothing said about abolition.
Well, it was, yeah, it was it was presented as a gift to commemorate the centennial, even though it was several years later that it was actually given as a gift. And its purpose was to memorialize Abraham Lincoln. The donors of it, the givers of it, were memorializing Abraham Lincoln and celebrating the end of slavery. But the recipients weren't very happy with that idea. Original design, I read, had holding chains in her hand that were,
Broken.
having been
The
broken.
shackles broken,
Yes,
yeah.
and now they are still on the statue down at one of the feet where you can't really see it from the ground.
Interesting. I
But
wonder.
they managed to maintain that even though there was objection to having it so public.
Do you know what the
in the
objections
display.
might have been about? I mean, I'm wondering if it was guilt over slavery, because it sounds like that was the original impetus to make it, right? It was the abolitionist supporter.
Yeah, I don't remember. I had heard this in a report back some time ago. I don't remember what the back and forth over the controversy was.
Well, maybe somebody listening will go check that and give us a call. We'll see. 343-9927. 343-9927. Help us out here. See if we can find out what the reason was, the opposition was to having the shackles in a prominent place, or the broken shackles in a prominent place on Lady Liberty. Now, you were saying she's a Roman goddess.
Yes, and there's another
But she
interesting
was originally a Muslim,
fact
right?
about this. Yeah, there's a professor at NYU, New York University, who wrote a book, Statue of Liberty: A Transatlantic Story, and he says that the sculptor who did this, Frederic Auguste Bartholdi, had previously worked on a statue and designed to be placed at the southern end of the Suez Canal. But Egypt went bankrupt at that time. This was back before it was a British canal. The French were planning to put a canal. We talked about that on an earlier program.
Yep.
And so he remembered then that the French abolitionist who was proposing this gift to the United States had this other plan, and so he took what he had designed as this statue modeled of an Arab woman to stand at the southern end of the Suez Canal, and he switched around and sold that idea to the abolitionists, and so we've got an Arab woman posing as a Roman goddess standing in the New York harbor.
Cool. And for all we know, the lower part of that robe that she wears now was actually part of a burqa. Of course, it became much harder, I guess, to do the statue then because they had to put facial features on it.
Well, Bartoli changed. Well, originally it was to be dressed in an Arab garb of Arab peasant.
I'm just entertaining myself. That's all.
So the sculptor changed the design of the dress from original Arab garb to the Roman goddess of liberty.
Right. Speaking of the Statue of Liberty not being its original name or not there for its original purpose or design, getting back briefly to the Liberty Bell. Oh, you were talking about slavery too, how slavery was related, or the abolition movement was related to the Statue of Liberty's initiation or whatever.
Yes, it was the liberty of the slaves that was celebrated.
Yes, and I mentioned earlier that the so-called Liberty Bell wasn't called that first. It was called the State House Bell. But then in the late 1830s in the United States here, it acquired the name of Liberty Bell when it became a symbol of the anti-slavery movement. So actually, the Liberty Bell that everybody celebrates, or all white people celebrate, for the liberty and justice that it proclaimed throughout the land, that is represented by our government, was actually referring to the anti-slavery movement, the abolitionist movement.
So both the Liberty Bell and the Statue of Liberty, the liberty they're talking
had
about
their
is liberty
roots,
of the slaves.
Yeah, I wonder, there's a subtle, subversion from foreign countries, I guess, huh? There's something like that, but anyhow, let's see. Anything else related to patriotic stuff? Otherwise, I'd like to move on to another interesting fact.
Well,
or thing.
There's a variety of things that could be considered related to patriotic stuff, as you put it. For instance, the significance of the date of the 4th of July in the Civil War. The 4th of July of 1863 was both when the Army of Northern Virginia withdrew from the Battle of Gettysburg, ending the Southern invasion of the North, and also the 4th of July of 1863 was when the Confederates surrendered Vicksburg, which was one of the Union's most successful campaigns in the war.
I wonder if
both of those were on the 4th of July.
Okay. I wanted to bring up something here too, and this way predates the American Revolution. But on July 4th, 1636, the city of Providence, Rhode Island was chartered. And just by fortuitous coincidence, trying to come up with my 50-cent words there, we had this subject came up in church, in my church, our church, last Sunday, concerning Roger Williams. Roger Williams was associated with the Pilgrims, who were the Puritans, so to speak. Basically, the Pilgrims came over here because they refused to worship the Church of England. They didn't want to adhere to its dictates. They wanted to, follow their own beliefs, which is certainly understandable. But then they came over here and began setting up their own official religions, and Roger Williams didn't like that. Plus, he didn't like that they were confiscating the lands of the Native Americans locally. So he began making a stink, and they didn't like that. So finally, they kicked him out. They told him, "Get out of here. We don't want. We are a Christian church. You're not. Get out of here. We don't want you around." And he was to come back later and publish all kinds of things, really harassing him for that, showing how, religious intolerance can be so cruel. But they banished him to the wilderness. And he viewed his idea of religion was that he didn't believe anybody could really know exactly what Jesus' church was, and therefore people should follow their own consciences. And he actually wrote about freedom of conscience. And I've read letters by the founders, by Madison and Jefferson, when they were urging the states not to have a state religion and a tax, supported with taxes, and because that was a problem with the states in the early years of this country. But anyway, but they banished Roger Williams to the wilderness, and he went and stayed with the Narragansett Indians, and he bought their land from them at fair market value, I've been told. And that became the Rhode Island Plantation, which eventually became the state of Rhode Island. But I found that was actually interesting there. But, I also, he was calling out the hypocrisy of the early Christians here who called themselves Puritans, who, I guess Roger Williams was the first one to advocate being Christ-like instead of just Christian, But anyway, so that's
Well, when you mention conscience and listening to what your own conscience has to say, you might also note on the 4th of July of 1845 was when Henry David Thoreau began his 6-month stay at Walden Pond.
Thoreau's my man.
10 years later, on the 4th of July, is when Walt Whitman published his first edition of Leaves of Grass. Those are other 4th of July events related to.
And July 4th in 1946 became Republic Day for the Philippine Islands. They were finally given independence from the land of liberty, the United States. As we've talked about here on the show a good ways back, the Spanish-American War was basically over after about 6 months. Spain capitulated and backed out. What took the next 3.5 years was subduing the Marines and the people of the Philippines because we weren't going to leave once we took control of the country.
Yeah, the 4th of July figured in several events in that relationship. The 4th of July of 1901 was when William Howard Taft became the American governor of the Philippines. And 2 years later, the 4th of July of 1903 was when the Philippine-American War was officially concluded. And then, as you stated, the 4th of July in 46 is when the U.S. granted the Philippine Islands their independence, and they celebrate it as Republic Day. Although June 12th is the country's official Independence Day since 1962. So I'm not sure what events are related to July 12th. But July 4th is their Republic Day.
Yeah, we probably declared the 4th just so we can, flatter ourselves or whatever. I don't know, but... Okay, anything else? Because I've got one little doodah here on the revolutionizing of... Is that the word? Revolutionizing of maritime commerce occurred on July 4th. You familiar with the Cunard lines?
Oh, yep.
Ocean liners, the Aquitania, the Lusitania, those were owned by the company of Cunard, and the company was founded by Samuel Cunard. But he built, or had built, paid to have built, a wooden steam-powered paddle steamer, they called it, cargo ship, that sailed from Liverpool, England to Halifax, Nova Scotia in 13 days, and it departed Liverpool on July 4th, 1840. But this set a record for maritime cargoes. It revolutionized it because, they had steam-driven ships long before that. They were on, both the oceans and rivers and things like that. But they had a habit of running out of coal on their way across the ocean, and there were other problems. The speeds weren't really that consistent. I guess the technology wasn't that good. But with the HMS Britannia, by the way, do you know what RMS Britannia, excuse me, you know what RMS stands for?
No, I don't.
Royal Mail Ship. And he got the contract for carrying the mail overseas, and so had the ship commissioned for that reason. But anyway, it sailed, and because it could now maintain a definite schedule, barring bad weather and whatnot, it wasn't subject to the wind or anything like that, it enabled companies to ship more goods because now they can have a schedule and say, and you know, tell the people overseas we'll have it here on this date, and it would get there on that date. So it really made a big change. And you know, I saw a picture. I saw the engineering diagrams of it. Oops, we're out of time, so I won't be able to make that joke. Anyway, Lang, thanks for joining me. And everyone, this has been Wayne Parker with Lang Baker on A Pause for Thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show. We thank you for listening, and we're out of here.